Hello, everyone, and welcome to FCC's virtual event, Gaining Influence Through Numbers. I'm your host, Caitlin Dubin, and I'm so excited to be here with you today. I'm a grain farmer from Southern Alberta, a storyteller, and a community builder. I have had the absolute privilege of celebrating the stories of women in agriculture through my podcast, the Rural Women Podcast, since 2019. We're back with another episode of the popular Women series. And if this is your first time joining us, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Thank you for joining us here today. We're going to spend the next hour together hearing from three amazing women who have all achieved confidence and gained control in their careers by mastering their finances. You will hear from Jessica Kelly, an agri-food entrepreneur and accounting professor at the Ivy School of Business, Janette Williamson, an AgExpert certified advisor and owner of Roots and Revenue. And finally, we have Kayla Reykdal, a partner from BDO. Our session today will run a bit differently from our previous in the Women series. Each guest speaker will provide their own presentation, and then there's going to be a panel discussion with all three of them at the end where you can ask all of the questions that you want. I am so excited for this episode. While today's session is being delivered virtually, wherever we find ourselves in Canada, we are on traditional Indigenous territories with rich traditions, stories, and histories that we have an opportunity to be curious and honor. This recognition is more than an acknowledgement of territory. This is about recognizing Indigenous people across Canada as the original caretakers of the land we work, live, honor, and play on, and to respect the diversity and strength of all Indigenous peoples. May we continue to learn and unlearn. Now, before we kick off on today's event, I have a few housekeeping things to share with you. This session will be recorded and a link will be sent out to everyone who registered. So if you must get away or you want to share this with family or friends after, that link will be available to you in a few days. If you have any technical questions, there is a blue support button on the bottom lower part of your screen. And as you may have noticed, there is a chat on. Drop a hello in there and let us know where you're dialing in from today. And beside the chat, there is a Q&A box. Feel free to ask any questions you have in there for the panel discussion. The Q&A is moderated, and I will ask your questions at the end of the session. Your questions can be anonymous. Now, let me introduce you to our first keynote speaker of the afternoon. Jessica Kelly, welcome.
Great. Thank you.
How are you?
I am well, thank you.
Good. Take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. So my name is Jessica Kelly, and I have the great privilege of kicking off this wonderful session today. My husband and I farm in southwestern Ontario. We raise specialty pigs and do a little bit of organic cropping as well. And then in addition to that, I teach accounting at the Ivy Business School in London. So I'd like to kick us off today thinking about a few personas. Now, whoops, we jumped ahead there a little bit. There we go. So I want to preface this by saying, of course, each one of us has our own unique experiences. That said, I think there's value in looking for perhaps some of the shared common elements between some of our stories and our experiences, particularly as it pertains to women in agriculture and finance and accounting. So perhaps as I go through these sort of three personas that I've created, you'll hear something that resonates with you. So the first persona I've named the invisible stakeholder. So this is the woman who lives on the farm, but is not included. She doesn't have a seat at the table for farm discussions. She does not have access to information. She does not know the financial situation of the farm. Quite likely works off the farm. The second persona I've created here, I've named the accidental accountant. Now, this is the woman who does the farm bookkeeping, perhaps by choice or perhaps because of tradition or expectation. She has limited influence when it comes to actual decision making, probably doesn't attend the meetings with the accountant, the lawyer, the banker, and perhaps is assigned this task on the farm or steps up to do this task on the farm because it's a bit more flexible than some of the physical work on the farm and perhaps a little more conducive and compatible with juggling competing demands for her time, like perhaps raising young children. She may feel qualified for this job. She might not feel so qualified for this bookkeeping job. She may or may not feel like the contribution she makes to the farm through bookkeeping is valued by the others on the farm team or in the family. The third persona I've identified here, I've named the everything manager. And this is the woman who's heavily involved with farm finances at all levels. So day-to-day bookkeeping all the way up to those big decisions. But inevitably, that's not her only job. She could work off the farm. She also could work very actively in the physical operations of the farm as well. She probably feels fairly regularly that she's doing a bad job of everything because, frankly, she's juggling 2 or 3 full-time jobs. And perhaps also struggles to feel like she's finding that balance between working in the business, the day to day, versus working on the business, the strategic. Now, I think as we work to understand our relationships with as women in agriculture with finance, I think it's important to acknowledge that we face some industry specific headwinds, I'll call it. Agriculture is heavily intertwined with family and tradition, and that comes with a lot of positives. It also comes with some challenges as it pertains to traditional roles and assumptions that are made. So I put one example up here for you. On the left, you will see the shareholder register of when my husband and I incorporated our farm in May of 2015. You will see that both of us own half of that farm business. You will also see on the right our articles of incorporation. So recently, in the last number of years, I discovered this discrepancy when I went to a Service Ontario office trying to do a relatively mundane transaction related to a vehicle for our farm and was told quite clearly that I did not have the authority to do that. And what I discovered was that without asking, our lawyer had assumed that my name did not need to appear as a director on our articles of incorporation, right? So just one example of the type of sometimes traditional assumptions that are made. I think another challenge we have in our industry is what we perceive to be work on the farm. And sometimes, certainly in some farm businesses and in some farming families, we have this notion that real work on the farm is only physical work. And that work that's done sitting at a desk, at a computer, is not contributing in the same type of way. So, given that background, I want us to dive into a few sort of challenges for ourselves. The first is around naming the work. So often in different situations, whether it's working as an educator, interacting with other farmers as a farmer myself, or in a past era of my life where I worked in the industry as a public servant, I would hear women say these words: I just do the books. And I'd like to start by challenging us all, at a bare minimum, let's drop the word just, because bookkeeping is important and vital work. Yes, production and yields are wonderful, but you don't have yields if no one pays the seed bill. And I'd also like to challenge you to do a bit of a thought experiment. If the accounting or finance work that you do in your farm was taken out of your business and put in a different business or a different industry, what would they call the person doing that work? They would probably call them a financial manager, a controller, perhaps even the chief financial officer of that company. It would most certainly not be called, I just do the books. I'm a firm believer that words matter. They reflect how we see the value of the work, and they also send a message to others about how we want them to view the value of the work that we're doing. I also know that farm finances, for probably most of us, bring about an emotional response, perhaps positive, perhaps negative, or most likely a combination of the two. And often those emotions are things that are tied to things that we maybe wish were different, but we don't necessarily understand these feelings well enough to be able to communicate to others what we need to change moving forward. In my experience, personally and through observation of others, there are usually or very often tensions or mismatches that underlie those emotions. So I want us to think a little about some of these tensions, that if we can sort of name and describe the tensions, we can start to change name and identify the emotions that we have. So what do I mean by that? I mean, let's think about on our farm, these things. As it pertains to accounting and finance, who does the work? Who has the knowledge? Who has the time? Who has access to information? Who has decision-making authority? Who carries the stress? And who deals with the fallout? Who's impacted if things don't work out? So if we go back to some of those personas, the very first one, right? Some might look at the invisible stakeholder. She doesn't have access to information or decision-making authority. As a result of that, some other people on the farm might assume that she carries no stress whatsoever. But perhaps the woman in that situation carries a huge amount of stress because she does not have access to information, does not have the knowledge, does not have decision-making authority, yet, if we go right to the middle there, is very much impacted if things don't work out. If we go to that third persona, the everything manager, she would look at this slide and say, well, I kind of do all of those things. I have the information, I do the work, I have the knowledge, I carry the stress, I have the authority. I'm certainly impacted if things don't work out, but I really don't have the time. And it really starts to bug me that there are other people in this farm business who also have knowledge, who also have access to information and perhaps don't put in the time. Or perhaps I feel like I'm the only one who's carrying the stress of, is there enough cash in the bank account to pay bills this month? Because I'm the one carrying all that load by myself. So I know that there are two great speakers following me here today, but I'd like to leave you with a couple key ideas here. The first is numbers are incredibly important. Even if the labels we often use kind of downplay their worth. So let's try to do maybe a better job of naming that work and giving it the names that connotate with them the true value that that work really has. Also recognizing that finances will elicit an emotional response from all of us. But there can be value in thinking about these tensions and mismatches between these different boxes of who, right? Where on our farm are there disconnects? Perhaps there's someone who's doing the work but doesn't have the knowledge. Perhaps there's someone who carries the stress but doesn't have decision-making authority. So I think it's helpful for us to better understand these tensions so that we can understand our emotions around them so that we can in turn communicate our needs to others. Because if we can name it and then we can describe it, we can work to make it better, whatever that might look like for each one of us. So I think that's it for me, Caitlin. I think I came in 1 entire minute under time. So I'm going to gift that minute to the next presenter.
I love that. Thank you, Jessica. We have so much to talk about in the panel. Can't wait for it. All right. Up next, Janette Williamson. Come on up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here today. And I just want to start by thanking all of you for taking time out of your day to join us. Okay, skipped ahead a little bit there too. Okay, so before I get started, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had a season where everything, the farm, the kids, the job, the books, felt heavier than usual? I've been there, and that's the journey that I want to walk you through today. I'm here to share my story with you, a story that's definitely personal. It's had its ups and downs, but I'm incredibly proud of where I stand today. So let's start at the beginning. To give you a sense of our world, my husband Kyle and I farm with his parents, and together we run a mixed operation of cow-calf pairs and grainland. Kyle works full-time on the farm. We have 2 little girls. We're community-minded people, and I'm sure as most of you can relate, there just never seems to be enough hours in the day. It's also important to note, and I'll get to where I am today, but that I've had a fantastic 11-year career with FCC, mainly as an ag lender for most of this story. When Kyle and I had the opportunity to start our own small piece of the farming puzzle, I took the reins and handled the books. I think I started with a spreadsheet and I quickly moved to the online AgExpert accounting program. Admittedly, in the past, I was very much a do your books annually and at the very last moment kind of gal, which honestly caused me so much anxiety. Each year I'd procrastinate, I'd forget how to do half the transactions, and the sheer thought of just starting again was crippling. It was a vicious cycle. By the spring of 2023, I was really struggling. My oldest had started kindergarten the fall prior. My youngest was in preschool. I was working full-time in town, juggling those daycare and preschool schedules, trying to keep up with life, and managing all the responsibilities that fall on so many farm wives when your husband doesn't walk in the door at 5 o'clock with you. I was burnt out, and then add the pressure of getting my books caught up for another year. I was in a terrible place. I remember being at various functions, though, and chatting with other farm women, and the conversations always seemed to be circling back to mental health. It became clear that I wasn't alone in what I was experiencing, and I knew I needed some help. I had a fabulous manager at the time who encouraged me to seek medical advice and consider taking some time off work. It was time to prioritize my own well-being. We all know that you can't pour from an empty cup, and so I got brave, I talked to my doctor, and I stepped away from work for a short period of time. During that time, it became obvious that I needed mental health support, but I also knew that I wanted a counselor who understood agriculture. I didn't want to spend half my session explaining our way of life. Through the Manitoba Farmers Wellness Program, I found a counselor in our nearest city. I value connection, and being able to sit face to face with somebody who gets ag has made all the difference. And I'm still seeing her today. And if my story resonates with you, I want you to know that no matter where you live in Canada, there's a resource for you. The Do More Ag Foundation is a nationwide program supporting mental health in agriculture. I have a QR code here that links to all the provincial programs. We're incredibly lucky to have these supports and the people who advocate for them. So I've stepped away from work, I'm prioritizing my mental health, and now I have time. No more excuses. It's time to get those books in order. With various FCC loans, one of the features is a free AgExpert subscription and free training sessions. We had just bought some equipment and financed it through the FCC Young Farmer Loan, and so I knew that I was eligible. I was already using AgExpert, but I knew I wasn't using it to its full capability. So I contacted the AgExpert team. I set up some training with a local certified trainer, completed a few hours of training, and got my books all up to date. I had submitted everything to my accountant, and it felt amazing. I had vowed to never let things get out of control again, and annual bookkeeping was officially behind me. There's such a stigma around doing your books. It's the job saved for the coldest winter day or the very last minute. But as I worked through getting caught up, something shifted. Kyle and I suddenly understood our operation more clearly. We had a better handle on our finances, we knew our position throughout the year, and we were better equipped to make faster decisions. And honestly, I surprised myself. I found that I really enjoyed doing the books, and I loved the AgExpert program. At the time, I was still an ag lender, but after returning to work, I decided to pursue a role on the AgExpert team. It took me about a year and many conversations, but I eventually became an AgExpert product specialist. And if I'm honest, a big part of that drive was wanting to learn everything I could to enhance our own farm books. I learned so much and met so many great people, but in all of my conversations with producers, one theme kept coming up. People knew that they needed to do their books, but they just didn't want to. And that's okay. I found myself wanting to help people in a different capacity. I didn't just want to educate people how to use the program. I wanted to actually do the books with them. There is a huge need for good bookkeepers in our industry, and I felt a pull to shift my career again. On a personal level, I'm turning 40 this year, and when my parents were 40, they sold our family farm in England and moved our family to Canada. And I kept thinking, if they could take that leap, surely I could take a chance on myself. So last September I did. I handed in my notice at FCC, leaned on the support of some incredible people in my life, including a mentor that I can't thank enough, and I launched my own business, Roots and Revenue. Today, I'm an AgExpert certified trainer and advisor and an ag-based bookkeeper, helping producers gain clarity, confidence, and influence through their numbers. I'm accepting new clients, so if anything in my story resonates with you, or if you're looking for someone to take bookkeeping off your plate, I'd love to connect to determine if I'd be a fit for your operation. If there's one thing that I hope that you can take away from my story, it's that numbers aren't just paperwork, they're power. They bring clarity when life feels chaotic, confidence when decisions feel heavy, and influence in the numbers in the moments that matter the most. I never expected bookkeeping to change my mental health, my career, or my sense of purpose, but it has. And I just want you to know that if you're in a season that feels heavy, you're not alone. There's support in this industry, and there is strength in reaching for it. If gaining clarity through your numbers can lighten even a small part of that load, then it's worth it. It certainly has been for me. So I want to thank you for listening and thank you for showing up today. for yourselves, your families, and your farms.
Janette, thank you so much. First, I just want to thank you for your vulnerability and sharing your story with us. That takes a lot of courage, and I'm someone who truly appreciates that, and I know our audience has too. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, up next and our last presenter, but certainly not least, Kayla Reykdal. Welcome to the stage.
Thanks, Caitlin. And yeah, Janette and Jessica, excellent job. So my name is Kayla Reykdal, and I'm here to talk about Manage Your Farm Finances. As mentioned, I am a partner at BDO Canada, and I live in Portage la Prairie, Manitoba. That is the heart and center of Manitoba, and so I am involved in agriculture and surrounded by a lot of it. Next slide, please. There we go. So on a personal note, dealing with a lot of agriculture clients, I also have 3 children myself, and my husband is involved in agriculture too. So I understand the needs of working as a family and working as a team and the extra demands that all come with it. So today I'm just going to talk about farm finances, and this is a quick disclaimer about my presentation. And I'll jump right into it. So BDO Canada was able to partner with FCC this past year to run a program called Manage Your Farm Finances. And there's 3 different categories that you're able to do some learning on around your finances. And I loved how Jessica talked about the persona of all women have a different role in the farm. And it also tied into Janette's part of the finances will actually help you with decision making. So I'm hoping today that you can get a little bit out of how this program works and entice you to register and understand the farm finances a little bit more detail. So in their farm finances, there's these 5 key factors. You're managing and analyzing financial statements that help you with strategies to protect the profitability. And in doing that, you have to understand your cost of production and the cash flow and debt management of how to grow your farm. And then with all of that, you'll be working with your lenders, and it would teach you kind of some strategies around working with them to grow your farm. The financial statements are important pieces of analyzing it. And these 4 reasons come to mind that the numbers don't lie. If the farm has a really good year, production goes well, the finances will show that. They're verifiable. If you're able to provide numbers at the end of the year, you can verify them after. For example, if you give an inventory number at year end, you're able to show the tickets of grain that was sold right after year end. You can always compare the finances by looking from one year to the next to see the ups and downs of what the decisions you made. And again, every decision has a financial consequence. So no matter where you are in the finance of your farm, it is very important. So some of the prerequisites of having sound financial information is having timely. So Janette talked about doing the books throughout the year, and that's really important to make key decisions. You also want them to be accurate. So being able to update them to the numbers that they actually are is important. And the last piece is talking about accrual basis. So there's 2 sides of accounting with your financial statements. You can either be recording your finances on a cash basis or an accrual basis. The cash basis would show your revenue that's coming in and out of your bank account. So it's all the cash that's received or paid. This gives you a clear picture of cash flow. It's often how producers will view their financial situation, but it's often easy to manipulate. If you go on accrual accounting, you're able to record your revenue and expenses as they're earned and incurred, not just when cash is exchanged. It better matches your operations, and it gives a better reflection of how that year actually went. So there's 2 statements that are very important on your financial statements, and that's the balance sheet and statement of operations, and they're very interconnected with each other, and we'll go into a bit more details of that. So on the balance sheet, the basic equation is the assets of what you own in the business and the liabilities of what you owe to somebody else. The difference between those 2 are your current earnings, which have accumulated in the business that you have retained and left there. There's a couple components about balance sheets, the recording them on book value basis or cost basis versus doing them at fair market value. So for example, if you have land or quota, it could be valued at a much higher if you were able to sell it, but looking at the balance sheet book value is more accurate. in certain situations. And then also separating current and long-term, you're able to make some better decisions based on that. So if you look here as an example, this is a grain and oilseed company that would have a balance sheet. You'd show the current assets of everything that you're probably going to flip to cash within the next year versus the long-term assets. If we go to the liability side of what you owe, you would look at any debt that you have to pay within 365 days or within the next year compared to anything that you owe after that 1 year. If we then would jump to the statement of operations, this also could be referred to your net income statement. The basic equation for this is the revenue of what business is generating as income, less your expenses of what you have incurred to produce the product, gives you your net income. So looking at your statement of operations, you're able to make better decisions by looking at the comparability or going down and understanding your income and your costs. If we look at specific expenses in these categories, this will help you understand the cost of production to be able to know how much you can actually sell your product for and make better marketing decisions. So there's 3 categories that are important for farms, one being the production expenses. So this is goods and services that are attributable to the production. Direct operating expenses could be some other variable expenses that will reflect the work that you do in your revenue. And then another category that is very important is the capital related cost. So as cost of iron is getting very expensive, to know your capital cost of what you're spending in your business is very important too, to understand that you're able to finance some of the debt. So here we can give an example of how you can look at different margins in your business by understanding the numbers. So your revenue would be anything produced. And again, this is an example of a grain and oil seed. And then you would look at your cost of goods sold that are directly attributable, your chemical, crop insurance, fertilizer, and seed. Then this would give you your gross margin to know what you made on production. You could take it a step further to go to your contribution margin by looking at the direct operating expenses and understanding the other variable expenses that come with producing the crop. This gets you to a contribution margin line, and again, helps you understand what you should be selling your product for. So flipping over to the balance sheet side of things, you're able to work with your lenders by looking at your finances from a health perspective. So on the balance sheet, we would want to look at the flexibility and strength of it. And on the income statement, you would probably want to look at the cardio side of it. Everyone goes to the doctor, or some do, once a year. This is a good test that you should be looking at your finances in more detail once a year. There's different ratios that are able to understand the health of the farm, and we're going to go through those ratios in a little bit more detail here. So the working capital ratio would show how flexible your farm is. It's understanding if the farm has enough resources for the next production cycle. It's calculated by the current assets divided by the current liabilities. Now, all financial lenders will have a certain threshold that you need to exceed or be above. And in this case, it's 2.04 for this farm, and the possible threshold to exceed was 1.25. So it's always good to be looking at your ratios and understanding where they are and into the future. The next ratio would be your debt to equity ratio. This would understand how strong the farm is if there was adversity, or being able to understand if you want to capitalize in any opportunities in the future. It looks at your external debt of what you owe to other lenders, and it's divided by the shareholder's equity and shareholder loan. So kind of what the farm is worth or what's been retained in the farm. This can be adjusted for fair market value reasons, just so that your lenders understand the true picture of the farm. But again, it's a good calculation to have to work with your lenders. The debt service ratio is the farm profitability, and it's understanding if the farm is making enough profit to service its existing debt obligations or be able to pay the next year debt amounts. So it looks at the earnings for the year, making those adjustments for interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, and then it compares it to all the interest and the debt that principal payments that are due within 365 days. Now, again, there's a threshold number here, and you would actually look at this ratio to decide if you want to expand the farm, such as purchasing more land. So it's another really strong ratio that you should work with your lenders for. So again, this is just a little taste of the Manage Your Farm Finances courses that are available on the FCC website that BDO collaborated with. It's free. It's a 3-course series that's specifically for Canadian agriculture producers, and it's designed to improve decision making, increase profitability, and communicate with partners more effectively and reduce risk. So again, the importance of finances, no matter where you are in the farm, can truly make a difference. So here's the QR code that you're able to register with. The learning is very practical and it's interactive, and you can actually do it at your own pace. So I know many women are wearing many different hats and in different roles. So you're able to do it at your own pace, either in English or French. And it also includes videos, quizzes, case studies, exercises, and also downloadable tools and templates. So please consider, if you want to learn a little bit more about your finances and farming, then please register for this course. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kayla. That wraps up the formal presentation portion of our afternoon. And can I just say a big kudos to you all for being on time and ahead of schedule, because we have so many great questions to discuss in this panel. First off, Jessica, I have to say a personal thing that I took from your presentation, taking the just out of your title, super important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you talk to us more about that and why that means so much to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So as as I used to work for a provincial Ministry of Agriculture, so I had the opportunity to go to lots of producer meetings where I was sort of sitting there wearing both of these hats as a farmer myself, as well as a support person to the industry. And I just feel like so often we downplay the value of this kind of work, right? And even in our own business or in other farms, I'll see people like, tease the person who's like, oh, well, you're going to go work in the office, right? And the people that are out in the cold in the winter are like, well, they're not really working. And it undervalues the importance of the work. And, to Janette's great comments around, um, it's also not work best done once a year, right? It's the kind of work that if it is done on a recurring basis, it gives everybody in the farm power to have better information about how things have been going and how they might be able to go in the future. And I think it's sort of the dual hat that I wear. I teach undergrad students, very few of who come from farm backgrounds. They have aspirations for these big corporate jobs. And for me, I have this interesting lens of regularly being reminded how difficult it is to manage a farm. We all operate on incredibly slim margins. So I get opportunities all the time to teach 20-year-old kids from urban areas how difficult it is to manage a farm. And I'm acutely aware that the type of jobs they're going after have these titles that seem big and fancy and important. And all of us do this all the time, but we downplay it to others. And frankly, I think that means we also downplay it to ourselves.
Absolutely. I've been a big proponent of taking the just out of anyone's title and especially on a farm, all of our roles are important, no matter it is if you're in the office or if you're out in the field. Nobody is just a farmer. We all wear all of the different hats.
Definitely.
Janette, question for you. Again, I want to say thank you so much for being so vulnerable with us today. I think it was really important. What was the turning point that made you realize that you needed to take control of your farm finances and your own well-being?
I just honestly really hated how the anxiety was making me feel. I knew that the benefits would outweigh the negativity, and that honestly nobody could change this around but myself. I didn't want to keep operating in that state, and I just knew that it would be better. I knew that it would be better for our operation. It would be better for the people that are assisting us with helping us making our decisions. And so I just really wanted to, kind of get back that organization and that kind of just be in control again.
Yeah, absolutely. A follow-up question to that, because I think this is important. What do you wish more people in agriculture understood about asking for help, and whether that's personally or financially?
Honestly, just that it's okay to ask for help. We're really good at leaning on so many professionals in this industry. You know, we lean on our agronomists and our accountants and our lawyers, but when it comes to asking for help for our mental health, we're not so great at that. But there are some fantastic resources out there, and once you tap into them, it's honestly a game changer, and it really it's made our operation stronger because I'm stronger.
Absolutely. And I think we're pretty quick to dismiss that our mental health can be directly tied to our financial health. You know, if things aren't going well with the bank account, it can cause a lot of stress personally to your business, to your family. So it really affects a lot of things. So again, thank you so much for sharing that with us today. I think I hope that's going to create more conversation about this at the kitchen table tonight. Kayla, you're up next. And I'm curious, as a female partner at an accounting firm in a male-dominated industry, have you ever found that difficult to gain trust from your clients?
Yeah, so absolutely. I'm a partner here in our office, and actually there's two female partners now, and I took over from a male partner, and he had a lot of agriculture clients that were males that were coming to the meetings. And it did take a lot of me trying to prove myself that I understood this industry and that I could give advice that was helpful for their farm too. And over time, I definitely think it has gone well. Uh, Agriculture is a very different industry compared to any other business. You do have to understand it too. Most businesses will be able to understand each other, whether they're in the industry of a grocery store or a car dealership or selling, widgets at their store. Most of the times, a lot of the operations go the same, but with agriculture, it's so different. Lots of times, farmers will be buying their costs for the next year that they don't even know what they're going to be able to be producing or making. So I felt like over time, as I proved myself and maybe brought just a little bit of a different product than maybe the past dominated males were bringing in the industry, then I got the trust of a lot of my clients and a lot of the farmers, and now I'm working together with them. And one other point that I always made was coming to a financial meeting. Again, back to I think Jessica's point that there's two shareholders in this business, but only one was showing up to the year-end meeting and maybe making those financial decisions. So I would always try and encourage that the families there and even the next generation and their spouses are involved in a lot of the decision making because it's such a family business.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, agriculture is a little bit different than other industries. At the end of the day, it's numbers on paper. So it is a business like any other, but when your family is involved, it makes it a little bit different. I have a question from the audience here, and just letting you guys know we have lots of times for lots of questions, so please pop them in the Q&A. A question says, I have two operations on our farm, farming income and other revenue. Is it simple to pull the ratios separately to each revenue slash expense operation? I'm going to give that to Kayla.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You can always do different almost income statements by product even. There's cattle and dairy operations, there's grain and cattle operations, there's chicken and grain operations. So lots of times there's lots of different things going on within a farm. On a financial statement, usually overall you will see the revenue and expenses likely grouped together. But you can do different reporting, and maybe Janette can even talk about AgExpert, how you're able to separate both operations. And you can even go as far as separating like grain and oilseed per commodity so that you figure out your margins of each crop that you're growing and determine which one made the most money in the year and showed the highest profitability.
Janette, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, you can definitely get quite specific in separating out your income and your expenses. So AgExpert is fantastic for allowing you to do that. If you I would also echo that or state that the AgExpert team, um, the it's escaping, like the help team, are fantastic. And so if you were to call in and ask for a little bit of guidance, they'd totally be able to help you out with that.
Awesome. Thanks, ladies. Kayla, there was one comment that was left in the chat about your QR code, and I just wanted to mention the QR code came back with a security issue. It
No.
says that this website may be impersonating FCC to steal your personal or financial information. You should close this page. We may need to check that out. So I think Shayna was reposting a website for them to use.
Thanks, Shayna.
Okay. Another question that came in from the audience here. Where are places you recommend reaching out for experienced support for doing farm value evaluations that can support farm transition discussions? Anybody have an answer for that?
I could jump in. So, at BDO, we actually do a lot of succession planning, which will include a valuation of the farm to determine the total value. There's different tax rules that will be out there depending if you do need a valuation or not. So, formal valuation of businesses can be done by BDO. I also think there's a lot of land appraisers that are available maybe in your area too that can help you with just specifically land appraisals. But I definitely, if you're interested, you can reach out to me after if you need any specific referrals in your area.
Great. Another question popped up here, and I like how this is asked. And remember, the questions can be asked anonymously. It could be your neighbor, or it could be somebody else. It doesn't need to be your personal question. But here's the question. My mom does our farm bookkeeping, but never seems to have enough time and doesn't want to give up control. She falls behind annually because she is waiting to get the books back from the accountant before starting the next year. Any tips for combating this cycle of always being behind? Tips for mom? Tips for child? Jessica, what
Yes.
about you?
Yeah. This is an interesting one. So we have our own farm business, but prior to us having our own farm business, I did some bookkeeping for my in-laws where I just tracked my hours. I was paid hourly because my father-in-law took on a second career where he actually went back and did a master's, and he realized he didn't have the time to do it. But now I find myself in probably this, I'm probably like the mom in this story where I fall behind on things because I have multiple jobs and I struggle to give things up and give up control. And if I'm being totally honest, a lot of that comes from this self-defeating idea of like I should be carrying this stress. Like I don't want to burden someone else with this task because part of this task is double checking to make sure there's cash to pay those bills, and I don't want someone else to have to worry about that. But I think it's worth trying to have some conversations that like, bookkeeping is not like one big giant thing, right? There is the ability to split some things apart. Right now I'm having a conversation around passing off our payroll to someone to do part-time so that I don't have to do that every week. I also, when I came back to teaching full-time, I didn't feel comfortable letting someone else sign checks or have access to bank accounts or anything like that. But I have a remote bookkeeper who happens to live in Kenya. But my remote bookkeeper has access to my QuickBooks Online. She has access to the email accounts where all of the revenues and like where all the bills come in and some sales receipts, and she enters things remotely. So I guess what my best advice is to perhaps try to have a conversation around like, are there pieces we could take off of this? Recognizing that there is the ability to sort of separate the job a little bit, and recognizing that some things like control over bank accounts and signing authority and checks are probably a little more like deeply personal than like could I just enter these bills for you? Or like open the mail and make sure that we don't miss bills. See, look for those things that are perhaps a little less contentious in terms of control.
I like that. Janette, as somebody who works with farmers who have given up the reins, any suggestions or advice?
Yeah, I think Jessica just answered that perfectly, actually. And that's what I was going to suggest. Really, if there are some aspects to it that can be, outsourced, then absolutely look into that, and keep those tasks that you enjoy or that are important for you to have control of. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing situation.
Absolutely. There's always that gray area there. Another question from the audience. Suggestions on how to apply the knowledge of financial literacy, for example, working capital, uh, to our actual operation and making decisions. Financial literacy. Let's go with Kayla.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. Again, that FCC course is really helpful with that. But one of the best stories that I can share is that I had a client and they were wanting to buy more land, and it was actually a generational farm. So dad was a little bit hesitant because I don't think he liked debt as much, and son was really wanting to expand the farm and go a little bit bigger. So we brought the clients in and we actually went through their finances and looked at the debt service ratio. And we took a comparative of the past even 5 years, just with the operations going up and down, and determined how well they were able to pay off their debt with the net income that they had each year, which is the debt service ratio calculation. And with that, we added in a little sensitivity analysis of purchasing this land in the future. And if with that added debt, if they would still be able to afford their loan payments. And we did some options of, more land and less land, and kind of just helped with the decision making around, dad feeling comfortable that yes, we can finance that, and son then getting to be involved in some of the decisions on the farm and wanting his hopes and dreams met too. So I think it was a really good discussion, and just looking at those numbers and ratios just gave them a better feeling to make that decision and purchase the land.
That's great. Jessica, I put you back on the spot. You had in your presentation the different personas that people had. Can we go over those personas again?
Absolutely, we can. So the first one was sort of like the invisible stakeholder, the on the farm, but really is kind of very much kept out of the loop, like not invited to the kitchen table meetings, kind of left out of the loop. The second was the sort of accidental accountant, they do the farm bookkeeping, but they're also probably juggling a million other things on the farm. And although they do the bookkeeping, they might kind of be kept at a distance from the bigger picture, strategic decisions or the big investment decisions. And then the third one was sort of the everything manager of they essentially have a full-time job doing everyday finance plus everyday bookkeeping plus financial planning. But then in addition to that, they're also perhaps working off the farm at an off-farm job, or also having like a physical job within a physical role, I should say, within the farm business as well. And there's obviously countless more, but I was trying to come up with three that I thought sort of characterized different personas that I've experienced over the years.
Yeah, I want to focus on the invisible stakeholder. Let's say that they, came into the operation through marriage or partnership. What do you suggest for folks who maybe want to bump up a notch to accidental accountant? How do you start those conversations around the kitchen table within your business and your operation to maybe ask for more of those responsibilities or to be asked to be included in them?
That is a really tough question, Caitlin, but a really
I would love to
important
hear from any of
question.
you.
But yeah, a really, really important question. And I think my very blunt answer is you don't start with finances, I think, is my very blunt answer. I think you need to like jump in the combine or go feed some pigs or go feed some chickens is my honest answer. In that I think in those situations, if you find yourself in an invisible stakeholder situation, whether it's an assumption that you're not interested that's being made, or whether they don't want you to be involved. The finances are probably going to be the most sensitive discussion, and I don't think you can start there. I think there needs to be a warm up to that involves a demonstrated interest and commitment in the other parts of the business. And maybe that means you work Monday to Friday at your office job or your off-farm job, and you try to figure out a way to ask some questions and learn and understand about the operations of the farm. And then from there can be an evolution, right? Once you start to learn about the agronomy or the production, then hopefully some walls will come down, right? And those people that don't feel that comfortable talking about finances, but love sitting around talking about agronomy and yields and feed conversions, in those moments, if they sense that you start to care and be excited about feed conversions and seeding rates, that you can start to nudge into like, how much did this acre of corn cost us to grow? And then you can kind of work up incrementally from there. Because starting with like, when mom and dad die, how is this farm getting split up is not going to be a great place to start.
Especially on Christmas. Don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Then.
No, yeah.
Kayla or Janette, anything to add?
I thought, Jessica, you answered that really well. I really like that. Obviously, as an accountant, I love the number side. I think it is important. One of the biggest things I hope with a lot of farms is they can work as a team. So if somebody has a strength in one area, leverage that so that you can help each other out. But it's definitely a different industry that you're not just usually wearing one hat or one role, you're in multiple roles. So you do have to overlap and be doing different things on the farm. So I like that idea of getting your hands dirty first and then going into the finance side. And the other part is just ask lots of questions. I think of my scenario where I'm an accountant, but I had to understand the industry a little bit more. And so my husband was an agronomist, and we would be driving down the field or driving down the highway, and I would start asking questions. And then I started trying to guess the crops every year. And just over time, you start to learn a lot about the industry. And just don't be afraid to ask questions, because I know I've asked a lot of stupid ones.
Caitlin, can I add one more thing to that?
You bet.
The other piece of advice I would add would be a shameless plug for the manager farm finances that Kayla was just talking about, right? Because if you're in that invisible stakeholder situation and you have no business background, even outside of agriculture, right? We've talked a lot about how agriculture is unique and special, but a balance sheet is still a balance sheet. And if you don't have any background in what is a balance sheet, what is an income statement, you're also, learning about crops and livestock or whatever they do on their farm, can build your own capacity in some of those business fundamentals. Then when you do get invited to the table, you're not going to look at it like, I have absolutely no idea what this is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. This question is for Janette, and it ties into this. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced when you were learning the books? Like we've all mentioned that it's accounting, but on top of it, it's also understanding farming and that background as well. What are some of the challenges that you saw getting into this industry that way?
Yeah, I mean, I had a background in lending, so that definitely helped me. But it was, I guess, kind of one of the challenges was not really knowing where to start. But once I broke it down and once I started asking for help, people are always willing to help you. And so, things just then started naturally flowing. Putting those systems in place that followed the rhythm of the farm was also a big game changer for me. And yeah, just kind of getting stuck in and utilizing resources available. I had talked about, the AgExpert certified trainer. And so that was fantastic. That was, I had questions, and that was a really good starting point for me, was being able to utilize a few hours there.
That's great. Kayla, what are some of the biggest sticking points that you see your clients having when it comes to their bookkeeping and their finances?
I think the ones that actually are doing it regularly on time and throughout the year are starting to start making decisions based on those finances. I have some of the, and probably, not stereotyping, but the younger generation will actually bring their laptops in because they've done a budget for the year and they were already calculating their cost of production. And they'll come in and compare it to the end of the year numbers to see kind of where they landed. So I definitely think just kind of keeping it as part of, working on the business, not in the business, but you're doing it monthly. Do a quarterly check-in, set some, goals throughout the year so that you're kind of accountable to it too.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, we only have a few minutes left. And as some amazing ladies in finance, I would be remiss not to ask the nerdy question of, do you have a favorite financial report or statement? And that goes to all of you. Jessica, do you want to go first?
Sure. So Kayla talked about the income statement and the balance sheet. I teach accounting. Obviously, they are incredibly important. Another one that I really love is the statement of cash flows. So when it comes to sort of understanding where cash is coming and going on your farm, a balance sheet only gives us a snapshot in time of one day, that last day of your fiscal year. The income statement, if it's done on an accrual basis, doesn't give us a perfect indication of cash, as Kayla said, although it's hugely important to do it that way for other reasons. But the statement of cash flows gives you this bridge between your balance sheets. It shows you your cash sources and your cash uses, and then it breaks them down into three sections: the operations of your business, investing, and then financing. So you can look at it and kind of get a picture of what happened in your year. You can say, like, our farm made this money and that money went to invest in land, or we made money through operations and we used it in the financing section to pay off debt. So it's a really great check, I find, to just say, how is our farm making money and how is it using money? Whether it's from operating, that's like the engine of our business, financing, whether we took out new loans or are paying off loans, or investing. Are we in an era where we're like buying assets or are we selling off assets? And I think if you can, for me, I always love that statement. It's a gut check of, does it line up with how I thought this year went? So that one I really love.
Awesome. Kayla or Janette, do you have a favorite statement or report?
One other one I like to look at is sometimes we'll run a 5-year equity analysis. So when I talked about the balance sheet less the liabilities, that leaves what your income was for the year and what you left in the company. And over 5 years, it can show you how well you've done, because there's years there. Agriculture is ups and downs and for some reasons that are out of our control. But I like to see that even though you've had those tough times, most of my clients are going upwards, and it's just nice to see their efforts are being rewarded.
Always like when it's trending up. There's a couple more questions here that I want to ask quickly, if you're okay with that. As someone who is doing their MBA and Masters of Ag, who wants to help the industry and producers, where do you see the biggest need? Made you think hard on this last question. We can come back to that.
I can jump in.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it's the understanding the costs and needs. Like, as prices are becoming so much higher and capital purchase are so significant, I think farms are having to make some really tough decisions of purchasing more or growing their land base. And before, it used to be that, your profits were good enough and you were working in the farm. But now, as costs get higher and higher and higher, I think that there's a huge demand to help farmers think of their farm more like a business and make these business decisions by looking at all the numbers, whether it even be, do you have the right machinery? Do you have enough hours in your machinery for the land base that you have? So a lot more details in the business side of the farming. I think there's definitely a need for that.
Absolutely. Anything quick to add?
I guess I would just say, I chat with students all the time since I teach in an undergrad program. Think about what you like to do, right? We being an agricultural banker is hugely helpful to farmers. Being an agriculturally focused accountant like Kayla is hugely helpful to farmers. So, do you want to work for a company like that? Do you want to be an entrepreneur and be your own consultant who works with farmers and helps farmers? Or do you want to be involved like directly in agriculture yourself? We have all sorts of farmers who, through their involvement in leadership and commodity boards and associations, themselves do a huge amount to help shape the industry and help others sort of from the inside out. So I would think also about not just what farmers in the industry need, but where your strengths are well suited to dive in.
Absolutely. What a great note to leave on. Ladies, Kayla, Jessica, Janette, thank you so much for everything today. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you again so much for your expertise and your presentations today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, thank you all so much for being here today. That was such a wonderful session full of women empowerment. That does it for us here today. I hope you are all able to take away actionable insights that will give you confidence when operating your farm. You will receive a link to this recording in just a few days through your email inbox. And you're also going to receive an email shortly with an evaluation form. Please fill out the evaluation form as that helps FCC plan future events. And if you are looking to expand your knowledge around farm finances to help you make more informed business decisions, be sure to check out the free Manage Your Farm Finance online course series, which offers practical and hands-on learning designed for ag producers. You can start from the beginning and work your way through the entire series, or jump right into the unit that is of interest to you. And you might even recognize a familiar instructor, Kayla. So look for that link in our post-event email. On behalf of FCC, thank you for joining us today, and I hope you have a wonderful day.